And
Thank you.
this introduces the administrative, informal, and workshop session of this meeting of the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach, hereby convened at 4:02 p.m. on this 11th day of October 2022. As always, members of the public are able to observe the school board meeting through live streaming on vbschools.com, broadcast on VBTV Channel 47, and on Zoom. And we welcome those present with us today in person. At 5:30, the board will conclude its meeting and no later than 5:45 to allow time to transition to the formal session of the school board at 6 p.m. With that, Madam Clerk, will you please announce those school board members in attendance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Present in the Einstein Lab are Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, Ms. Anderson, Ms. Felton, Ms. Manning, and Ms. Owens.
Thank you, and I can announce that Mrs.
And Mrs. Riggs.
And Ms. Riggs.
So we have Mrs. Franklin is absent tonight due to an out-of-town work commitment. Mrs. Holtz will be absent due to health reasons, and Mrs. Hughes, thank you, due to illness will be Zooming in.
She's not on.
Okay. So administrative matters, anybody? Well, I'll go ahead and mention that I'm going to start to circulate with thanks to our clerk, Ms. Toniato, the VSBA annual convention. She's seeking initial interest from colleagues, so we'll circulate that. And I've been asked by the Education Foundation to remind everybody of the groundbreaking ceremony on Thursday for the new house project. And if you plan to attend and have not let Mrs. Hughes know or need the email invitation resent, please contact Mrs. Hughes, Debbie Hughes directly. Sorry.
I don't think I received anything about that.
Okay, I can connect you with Debbie Hughes.
Okay, thank you.
And that's it for me. So I think, Dr. Spence, we can go right into our workshop.
Great. So Heidi Janicki is going to kick us off on our conversation this evening about student discipline and behavioral supports.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, members of the school board, and Dr. Spence. I'm Dr. Heidi Janicki, Director of Research and Evaluation. This afternoon, I will share an overview of 2021-22 student discipline data within the context of historical trends. Following a review of the data, Mr. Delaney, Chief Schools Officer, will share information about behavioral supports in schools. There are three general purposes of the data portion of the presentation: to provide an overview of the end-of-year discipline data from 2021-22 school year, to review the 21-22 data as part of examining trends over the last 20 years, and to review related perception data as another point to consider when interpreting the discipline results. The behavioral supports portion of the presentation will provide an overview of supports for students, including mental health supports, supports for teachers and school teams, and professional learning. The types of data that will be presented include discipline referrals, referral ratios for student groups, which provides a picture of over or underrepresentation of student groups in the discipline data, referrals for specific types of offenses, suspensions, and perception data collected from surveys over the years. As a reminder, in 2019-20, discipline data was not available from March through June due to the buildings being closed. In 2020-21, discipline data was also impacted due to approximately 43% of the division students attending as full-time virtual students. The distribution of virtual students across schools in the division was also not the same at each school and impacted some schools more than others. Therefore, data from these 2 years is not comparable to other years, and you will see this depicted in the upcoming graphs. To begin the data review, this slide provides an overview of the student discipline data for the 2021-22 school year. Referral data is shown on the left in blue, and suspension data is shown on the right in green. The percentages are based on all students in a particular group. Overall, 15% of all students in 21-22 received a discipline referral. This percentage was higher for male students, Black students, economically disadvantaged students, and special education students, which is consistent with trends from prior years. For example, 24% of Black students were referred last school year. 49% of students who were referred received more than one referral. Regarding suspensions, 9% of all students in 21-22 were suspended. This percentage was also higher for males, Black students, economically disadvantaged students, and special education students. For example, 16% of Black students were suspended. Almost half, 49%, of all discipline referrals resulted in a suspension, which could have included in or out of school suspensions or expulsions. Next, we will review discipline data trends over the last 20 years, starting with student discipline referrals. The measures that we examined related to discipline referral data included the total number of referrals, the percentage of students referred at least one time, and the percentage of referred students who were repeat offenders. A picture of the total number of referrals over the past 20 years is shown on the slide. As noted previously, discipline data were impacted by the pandemic in 1920 and 2021.
Heidi?
Yep.
It jumped ahead the slide.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Although the data points for these years are included on the slide, they were not included in the trend line. Overall, the total number of referrals in the division in blue has shown a downward trend, and in recent years is notably lower within the historical context. Trends for elementary school are shown in orange, middle school is shown in gray, and high school is shown in yellow. However, it is important to note that the number of referrals is impacted by changes in student enrollment. The slide shows the percentage of students referred at least one time, which takes into account the changing student enrollment over the years. Overall, across the division, shown in blue, there has been a slight declining trend, with more recent percentages remaining relatively stable. 20 years ago, in 2002-2003, 24% of students, almost 1 in 4, received at least one referral. This percentage was 16% in 18-19 prior to the pandemic years, and was 15% in 21-22. The results show that higher percentages of secondary students are referred at least once compared to elementary students, but at each school level, percentages for the 21-22 school year were the same or lower than the percentages for 18-19 prior to the pandemic. They are also lower than they were 20 years ago. This slide shows the percentage of referred students who had more than one referral during the school year. Overall, there is a slight downward trend for the division, shown in blue, and at the secondary levels, in yellow and gray, with more recent percentages remaining relatively stable. In comparison to 18-19, prior to the pandemic, there was a 3 percentage point increase in the percent of high school students who were repeat offenders in 21-22. However, the overall picture does not suggest an upward trend. The next data element we examined was discipline referral ratios for student groups. Discipline referral ratios provide a broad measure of discipline disparity where referral rates for two student groups are compared. The first step is calculating referral rates for each student group, which is the percentage of students in the specific group who received at least one referral during the school year. Then referral ratios are calculated by dividing the referral rate for one group by the referral rate for another group. 4 different referral ratios will be shown on the next several slides, for Black students relative to white students, and by gender, economic status, and special education status. The interpretation of the referral ratios is shown on the slide. Ratios of 1 mean the referral rates for the two groups are equal, whereas a referral ratio of 2, for example, would mean the referral rate for the first group was twice as large as the other group. For referral ratios Data are shown beginning with the 2010-2011 school year due to changes in the federal race and ethnicity reporting categories at that time. In earlier years, there was an upward trend of referral ratios for Black and white students at all levels, meaning more disparity. However, that trend has not continued in more recent years overall. Elementary school ratios in orange have fluctuated the most, with the referral rate for Black students being almost 3 times as large as the referral rate for white students in 21-22. Over the years, referral ratios have been consistently lowest at the high school level, meaning less disparity compared to other school levels. Over the years, ratios by gender have been consistently highest at the elementary school level and consistently lowest at the high school level. Ratios by gender have also fluctuated the most at the elementary school level. Although there looks to be a downward trend in more recent years at elementary schools, the referral rate for male students was 3 times as large as the referral rate for female students in 21-22. At the secondary levels, in the earlier years, there was a slight upward trend, meaning more disparity. However, there has been a slight decline in more recent years. This slide shows referral disparities based on students' economic status, where economically disadvantaged students are more likely to be referred than their non-economically disadvantaged peers. In earlier years, there was a slight upward trend in referral ratios based on economic status at all school levels, meaning that there was more disparity. In more recent years, the ratios at elementary school and middle school have fluctuated and have stabilized. Over the years, ratios by economic status have been consistently lowest at the high school level. However, across all levels, economically disadvantaged students' referral rates remain 2 to 3 times as large as those who are not economically disadvantaged. This slide focuses on disparity in referral rates for special education and non-special education students. There's been a slight upward trend for ratios by special education status at all levels, meaning more disparity, though there were decreases at each level in 21-22 compared to 18-19. Over the years, the disparity based on special education status has been consistently highest at the elementary school level, with special education students having referral rates twice as large as non-special education students. Based on the student code of conduct, discipline referrals can occur for a wide variety of offenses. For the next part of the presentation, data were focused on specific offenses that are most problematic or were more common offenses. Measures that we examined related to specific types of offenses are shown on the slide. The percentage of referrals and number of offenses classified as persistently dangerous were examined. Persistently dangerous referral offenses are defined by the state and include behaviors that contribute to schools being deemed as persistently dangerous by the state, such as use of a bomb or explosive device, assault with a firearm or other weapon, or illegal possession of controlled drugs and substances with intent to sell or distribute. While data for these types of offenses will be shown, it is important to note that as a school division, we have not had a school classified as a persistently dangerous school. In addition, the percentage of referred students with at least one fighting or aggression offense was determined. Relative to other offenses, fighting or aggression has been one of the top categories of offenses in the past. One reminder is that starting in 2021-22, there were new discipline guidelines to align with the reporting required for the state's Student Behavior and Administrative Response, or SBAR, data collection. These new guidelines changed how referrals were classified and grouped. To the greatest extent possible, the fighting and aggression offenses in 21-22 were crosswalked and aligned with those that were fighting and aggression offenses in the past. Typically, we would examine data based on a percentage to account for changes in the size of the group. When we look at the percentage of all referrals that included an offense labeled as a persistently dangerous offense by the state, with the scale we have been using, the percentages are so low that they cannot be seen clearly. For all years, the percentage of referrals that included a persistently dangerous offense ranged from 0% to 0.25%. This chart shows the actual number of offenses that have been classified as persistently dangerous over the years. Across the division of over 68,000 students in 21-22, there were 40 offenses classified as persistently dangerous. The numbers show increases in these types of offenses at the middle school and high school level since 1718, contributing to the increase at the division. Offenses for fighting or aggression were also examined because they have been one of the top categories of offenses in the past. This slide shows the percent of referred students with at least one fighting or aggression offense, regardless of whether it was their primary offense. At all levels, there has been a general upward trend in more recent years prior to the pandemic, and then a pattern of relatively consistent percentages from 18-19 to 21-22. Over the years, elementary school has consistently had the largest percentage of referred students being referred for fighting and aggression offenses, followed by middle schools and then high schools.
That is interesting.
The next data element was suspension data. The measures related to suspension data are shown on the slide. To provide context within the student population, the percentage of students enrolled who were suspended at least once will be provided. The percentage of referred students who were suspended at least once and the percentage of referrals resulting in a suspension were also examined. This slide shows the percent of enrolled students who were suspended at least once, which was 9% across the division in 21-22, and was lower than it was 20 years ago at 15%. For the student population at high school and middle school, there has been a slight downward trend with rates stabilizing more recently. There was a slight 1 percentage point increase at middle school from 18-19 to 21-22, and a 1 percentage point decrease at high school. The percentage of elementary school students who are suspended has not changed much over the years. Shifting the measure from the overall student population to those students who are referred shows a slightly different picture. This slide shows the percent of referred students who were suspended at least once. While the data was showing a declining trend for certain periods of time at middle and high schools, the percentages of referred students who were suspended has increased in 21-22. The suspension rate has also increased for elementary school in 21-22. These data align with some of the offense data we saw previously.
Means the teacher's written referral to the office for discipline.
This slide shows the trends in the type of suspension,
And these
in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension. As shown on the slide, in the earlier years, ISS was more prevalent than OSS. However, the gap has been closing in more recent years. In 21-22, the pattern reversed with a higher percentage of referrals resulting in OSS than ISS at the division level. The final data element was perception data to provide additional context for interpreting the discipline data. A relevant survey item that has been included on various surveys over time is whether school was a safe and orderly place to learn. Data is available for this item back to 2006-2007. Any missing data in the upcoming charts is due to years when the survey data were not collected. Although there have been changes in terms of who responded to surveys and in the focus of the item, results for the item provide an overall general assessment of the perceptions. It is important to note that the survey data from 1920 was prior to the pandemic, but 2021 data would have been impacted by virtual instruction for many students. Student perceptions of school being a safe and orderly place to learn has been high and remained relatively stable at the elementary school level, while there have been positive trends at the middle school and high school levels. At all levels, agreement percentages were highest in 2021 and 21-22 compared to prior years, with at least 90% agreement. For school-based staff, the survey item changed in 2021 and 2022 from whether the school was a safe and orderly place for students to learn to whether the school was a safe and orderly place to work. Across all years, at least 80% of staff have agreed with the items. More recently, at least 90% of staff agreed their school was a safe and orderly place to work. For classroom teachers only, in 21-22, at least 88% at each school level agreed. Parents have also been very positive over the years, with at least 88% of parents at each school level agreeing school is a safe and orderly place for students to learn. The next several slides provide a summary of the overall patterns. In summary, discipline referral data showed a general downward trend with referral data stabilizing in more recent years. Referral ratios for student groups showed trends of increasing disparity in referral rates in earlier years examined, but the trend has not continued in more recent years. While disparity still exists, there is some indication that it is not getting worse. Disparity was highest at the elementary school level, especially for males, and lowest at the high school level overall. Referral data for specific offenses showed increases in the number of persistently dangerous offenses at the middle and high school levels. There has also been an increasing trend in fighting and aggression offenses prior to the pandemic, especially at the elementary school level. Suspension data showed that although the percentage of the overall student population being suspended has been relatively stable, the percentage of referred students who were suspended has increased. In addition, the referrals resulting in OSS have increased. Perception data have shown staff and parents have consistently viewed school as safe and orderly. While elementary school student perceptions have been consistently positive, middle and high school student perceptions have had a positive trend in more recent years. Together, the data suggests that behavior issues are not getting worse based on the percent of students receiving a discipline referral. However, data suggests the behaviors of those who are receiving a discipline referral might be considered more serious, and their outcomes, suspensions, are reflecting that. This has not had a noticeable impact on overall perceptions, with 91% of students, 93% of school-based staff, and 94% of parents indicating last year that schools were a safe and orderly place to learn and work. At this time, Mr. Delaney will discuss behavioral supports.
Thank you, Dr. Janicki. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, members of the school board, and Dr. Spence. I'm going to share an overview of our behavioral supports that we offer in Virginia Beach City Public Schools. This includes professional learning supports, mental health supports, and behavioral interventions. We will include a video that highlights the work of school counselors, behavior intervention specialists, and student support specialists as well. As you know, we implement the Positive Behavioral Interventions and Support Framework, better known as PBIS, to strengthen our practices and improve our strategies to support pro-social behaviors, high-quality learning experiences, and social-emotional development. PBIS provides schools a data-informed decision-making process to guide the purposeful integration of our VBCPS social-emotional learning practices and help develop the skills outlined in our graduate profile. PBIS school teams work with staff to address disproportionate discipline data, provide tiered interventions of support, and supports to reinforce pro-social behavior and, most importantly, respond to student needs. Proactive approaches like school counseling services and responsive classroom practices are a collaborative effort. Multiple staff, offices, and departments collaborate to ensure students are supported in schools and in various learning environments. For example, our school counselors teach lessons, meet with students, parents, and teachers during conferences, and organize 504 and SRT meetings. With that said, professional learning over the past several years focused on positive supportive learning environments for our students. Student-teacher relationships continue to be an area of focus, along with prevention and intervention through a multi-tiered support system promoting approaches to student behavior and school discipline. Professional learning is offered to staff to foster a proactive approach to supporting students and teachers. I'd like to give you a moment just to review this slide. It's pretty comprehensive in terms of what is offered. During the past school year, we had over 1,900 staff members engaged in professional learning. As was recently mentioned by Mr. Freeman during the September 27th board meeting, bus drivers engaged in professional learning focused on building relationships, student behaviors, and bus drivers' roles within the PBIS framework. Additionally, there are multiple opportunities for our staff to build their capacity and skills based on their interests as well as individual and school needs. Over the past month, behavior intervention specialists, participated in a 2-day crisis prevention training, and school counselors engaged in professional learning opportunities focused on trauma-sensitive de-escalation strategies. Professional learning offered by VBCPS is diverse and differentiated to help ensure these activities yield the desired outcomes. From the supports in place for students to the resources available for staff, along with the various professional learning opportunities, our school division has multiple structures in place to achieve our mission and goals of our strategic framework. So I'd like us to hear from some of these individuals that are involved in this work.
Personally seen the dedication that Virginia Beach has provided for behavior support, enhancing behavior support for students in Virginia Beach. When I started in this role, there were 3 specialists, and each of us had between 25 and 30 schools assigned to us. And now we have 25 specialists and 7 behavior intervention teaching assistants, with each specialist being assigned 3 to 4 schools at the elementary level and 9 to 10 at the secondary level.
Our behavior intervention specialists are here to help build the capacity in our building. They're here to support our students, not only our students, but also our staff, our teachers. So when we have a student that is in need of behavioral supports, we communicate with our teachers, our administrators, our counselors, and we reach out to those behavior intervention specialists. We also communicate with our parents to make sure that we have parental permission for our behavior intervention specialists to come into our classroom.
Some of that support looks like professional development. Some of that looks like focus on prevention and intervention strategies, and we have a heavy focus on data collection as it relates to challenging behavior. And so we're a collaborative team with enhanced knowledge, and our sole goal is to help students achieve their greatest success.
I support the students here as a school counselor, and we definitely do PBIS all throughout our school day, all throughout our school building for all of our students. And sometimes we know that some students need additional layers of support, and we tier those layers of supports for the students who might need them. Multiple times during the year is we, myself as well as our part-time school counselor and administrators, we meet to make sure that we're offering students the proper layers of support. And we do this multiple times throughout the year because we know that some students may need more or less depending on what's happening during the year. And we definitely want to make sure that we're meeting all our students' needs as well as supporting teachers in that aspect as well.
Students learn about the 4 B's from their teachers. They teach them at the beginning of the year, and we follow those rules throughout the whole year. The 4 B's are respectful, responsible, ready, and supportive.
We follow those 4 B's so that we build our relationships, we have a positive school environment so that kids can learn and become productive citizens. Students want to come to school, and they want to come to school when we have a consistent and positive environment. It allows them to be safe and productive citizens, encouraging them to be future ready.
One thing about PBIS is that sometimes students will need Tier 2 and Tier 3 support because the behaviors that we're expecting are still very demanding for some students that need some of that extra help. And sometimes we as teachers, I'll be honest, we get a little frazzled when the students don't seem to be quote unquote cooperating, but more likely they're really just not understanding expectations, or they're having some other issues that are making it hard for them to sort through emotions and feelings and choose behaviors that we're expecting. So one thing that Virginia Beach does fantastically is the BIS program. Behavior Intervention Specialists are here for students and for teachers that need that Tier 2 or higher support. Last year was the first time that I really did need that Tier 2 and Tier 3 support from the district, and I was so grateful that we had a fantastic BIS come into my classroom to observe my instruction non-judgmentally. And the whole point of that was to see what were some of the strategies that I could use as a teacher, and what were some strategies that the student could benefit from to help regulate behavior. I found that there were a couple of gaps in my teaching practice that I wasn't even aware of. I thought that I was doing everything quote unquote by the book. But seeing the behavior intervention specialist come in and say, well, this small thing that you were doing was actually a little trigger for the student, that made me more mindful of the student's needs. So I was really grateful to rely on the expertise of somebody that has worked with students with challenged behavior a lot longer than I had been.
Within the tiering that we do of the layers of support for students, we know that some students may require what's called a student response team meeting. So with that, it's taking information from the teacher as well as information that we might might need from other support, such as our behavior intervention specialists, myself as a school counselor, and sometimes it could be other educators in the building that help support that student, maybe from the reading specialist to the math specialist. And we meet with the family. Definitely, it's a team that includes the family, and we talk about the types of interventions we want to put in place. And we track that for 6 weeks, and the classroom teachers are noting which interventions, which supports are successful, not successful. And when we re-meet, we then discuss what do we do how do we move forward? Do we move forward with similar interventions if they were successful? Do we think of new interventions? Or do we have to just completely think of a new strategy to support those students?
So BASE is a behavior and social emotional program. It is a Tier 3 intervention for general education students, and it's for those students who are exhibiting significant behavioral dysregulation.
We provide intensive interventions and support in a structured setting based on the data that we have for 6 to 9 weeks. While students are in our program, they are provided coping skills and they're taught strategies to regulate emotions and behavior, in addition to following the academic curriculum.
As a student support specialist, I work with students who are transitioning from any alternative placements as the Renaissance Academy, Juvenile Detention Center, even students who are in transitional housing, like a Seton Youth Shelter or a crisis home. We work with those students as they're transitioning back to their home school. We're in all middle schools and all high schools, and we work with those students with teachers, with administrators, with counselors, to help them transition as smoothly as possible, to get them to understand the new rules, expectations of the school, and how the school functions from the previous placement that they were at. We actually have parent meetings, usually re-enrollment meetings for the students. We meet with the administrator, the counselor, the parent, or parents, and the student in a meeting before school even starts to get them enrolled, to tell them about how we are there to help them in their transition and how we will support them as parents and the student as well.
We use a lot of social and emotional learning opportunities with social stories, with activities. The curriculum is actually very closely tied in with SEL. And it's wonderful speaking to the folks that help the division write our curriculum that we can actually use those SEL components in our instruction. So not only are students taught about behaviors, but they're also taught about how their feelings can lead to positive behaviors. Sometimes how their feelings can tend to lead to negative behaviors, and that's where we kind of come in there with those interventions in the PBIS system. At Allenton Elementary School, as with every other school in Virginia Beach, we really want to foster relationships between the teachers and their students. That relationship building is the most important part for building a strong community and also for teaching the students and training them in how to work with each other. Social and emotional learning is a very important part of every student's academics. It should be a very important part of everybody's development, and Virginia Beach schools are very, very tuned and keyed into that idea. So one thing that I like to do in our class is focus on our positive behavior interventions and supports, our PBIS system for the district. Every school has bought into this amazing framework for helping students learn that behaviors are choices, and that oftentimes they don't feel like it at the very beginning. So working, especially at my group at a primary level, students sometimes operate off of feelings rather than their feelings and emotions, rather than what's the most logical thing to do, what makes the most sense in this situation, or sometimes what is the most respectful, responsible, and safe decision. Students need help training to get to that. So we focus on building a positive community at our school and at all other schools. We as teachers have to remember that students come to school not knowing how to read, so we teach them how to read. They come to school not knowing how to count, so we teach them how to do that. And many times students come to school not knowing how to behave, so we teach those behaviors to them. And that shift in framework has really helped me understand that I'm not expecting perfection from my students, just like I wouldn't want my principal to expect perfection from me. This is all a growth process. And with that growth mindset, I really have had a shift in my mindset about how I see problem behaviors and how we do correction, behavior correction, there on the spot, immediate, phrased positively. So instead of using "don't run in the hallway," we say things like, let's use safe walking feet. Boys and girls, let's walk closer to the wall in a straight line so that it's safer for us to hear directions. So rephrasing and reframing those error corrections in the PBIS framework have helped me to see how the behaviors themselves tie into a holistic picture for what we're expecting from the children.
Also feel it's really important to talk about the mental health supports that are in place for students. It's paramount to our success, and their success and directly impacts student behaviors. As outlined in Compass 2025, we are committed to ensuring systems are in place to promote mental wellness for our stakeholders with a focus on student well-being. The work of the Blue Ribbon Task Force, along with the recent efforts of our Mental Health Task Force, really demonstrate our commitment to student safety, behaviors, and mental health, which you heard from Mr. Bobby Jamison outlined in great detail during the school board retreat, school board workshop this past July. He is also here to answer questions when we move into that portion of the presentation. As many of you may know, in September, the Chief Transformation Officer, Eric Moeller, appointed by Governor Glenn Youngkin, affirmed a focus on mental health and report to the General Assembly, where he directs $1.3 million to help redesign the mental health care model in Virginia. VVCPS is dedicated to doing the same, and work is moving forward to implement a rapid response program for elementary school students through Virginia Beach Child and Youth Behavioral Health Services, and a bridge program for secondary students from the Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters. These partnerships provide increased access to mental health services for our students and families. Also new this year is a suicidal ideation resource for school-based mental health staff. This is a step-by-step guide to walk school-based mental health staff through protocols to use when students are exhibiting signs or symptoms related to a potential mental health crisis. Additionally, the Return to School Plan of Action meeting form provides schools with a framework for a transition plan to assist students returning to school after experiencing a mental health crisis. As a reminder, again, using integrated systems of support is one of the big three strategic action agenda items for the current school year. Integrated systems of support are the processes used to ensure students receive the supports they need. You saw several examples in the video. These processes include the Student Response Team, Section 504 Team, and Special Education Committee. And this multi-tiered approach to supporting students in turn supports our teachers, staff, and school communities. There's direct access or referral systems in place to leverage the resources or programs outlined on the slide, and administrators regularly engage in conversations with teachers and staff to consider the possible supports when appropriate. For example, teachers may seek assistance from behavior intervention specialists, PBIS coaches, and school counselors, and student support specialists to assist with specific student behaviors or their classroom learning environments. When looking at programs, the BASE program is a short-term intervention for students in kindergarten through second grade who may lack educational experiences or need additional structures to help them engage in pro-social behaviors within the general education environment. The focus of the BASE program is to teach early elementary students coping skills, problem-solving skills, and social skills needed for supported behavior management. For secondary students in need of additional support, Choices is a 10-session instructional program for students who inconsistently demonstrate appropriate behaviors, and is led by individuals like Mr. Collier, our student support specialist, or other trained staff. While participating in the Choices program, students will experience group discussions, modeling, as well as coaching and practice to increase their decision-making abilities and self-regulation. As you can see, there are numerous supports available across our schools and centers to assist teachers in addressing student behaviors. Representatives from PIA, Teaching and Learning, and School Leadership are available to answer questions at this time.
Well, thank you both for this thorough presentation. So who would like to kick off our Q&A session? Ms. Owens?
Yeah, I have a couple, so if there are other people, then cut me off and I'll get back in the queue. One, I just wanted to get clarification about how it was explained. I think this was, there's the snapshot slide. The 24%, and it gave all the percentages of students referred. Was that 24% of all Black students are referred, or is it of the referrals, 24% of those are Black students?
It was your first one. 24% of all of the student group of all the Black students were referred.
In that school year?
That's correct. In 21-22.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Another question. This one is about the perceptions of the school being a safe and orderly place to learn. I'm just curious, in that data collection, is that question asked as a yes or no or a Likert scale?
It's asked on a 4-point scale: strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree.
Okay. We got the data that says kind of the percentage of agreement. Do we have any information about whether that kind of Likert number has shifted over time?
In terms of the percent strongly agree versus percent agree,
Correct.
We would have to go back to pull that. We could certainly do that for the more recent years,
Okay.
where we have the raw data.
And I don't know how specifically relevant. I don't want to just send you to guys do work for no reason. But when we're getting the this percentage agrees, it's kind of helpful to know. You know, it used to be they were up here. Now they still agree, but they're down here. It still counts within agreement. So, just curious. And then in the video, one of the speakers was saying that parental permission is obtained for behavioral specialists to enter the classroom. Could you talk a little bit more about how that works?
So, leave the mic. Good afternoon. We do have a form in place that our teachers are able to use so that the information that is being sought from the behavior intervention specialist is clarified. And if that requires that the BIS, behavior intervention specialist, would be spending time supporting a specific student, like we do for any formal observation, we get parental permission or consent prior to having the BIS come into the classroom.
Gotcha. Okay, so for similar to if you were doing a student support team or something, you would.
Student response team or any of the different formal observations that would occur, yes,
Okay.
consent is obtained.
Okay. And then my last question, been going through, the last slide had different supports for teachers and school teams, and one of those was the school level discipline flow chart. Is that document something that's like generally available for the board or public to look at?
Mr. McGee, the discipline flow chart is separate from the discipline guidelines. So I think that's typically an internal document, but let me check on that, Ms. Owens, based on your question on who has access to that.
I'd be curious. I would like to see it if, as a start, but I think there might be benefits to parents and even students having access to see, here's the behaviors, here's what they're looking at. You have the same information about the possibilities of things that can happen in the flow of behavior and choices.
Now, that is included in the student code of conduct in terms of the interventions that are in place based on the infraction. So parents do see that every time they look in and sign off on that, and that is clearly identified in that document. So I'll get you a better indication of what the flow chart is utilized for.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Manning.
Yes, I have just a few questions. The slide 24% of referred students were suspended at least once. I assume, does that include students being referred to Renaissance Academy?
It would be based on those that had the final disposition of suspension. So if they were sent to Renaissance Academy, I don't believe that would be.
Yeah, because I think what's classified as suspensions are deferred if they're going to Renaissance Academy, right? Is that, it's still considered a suspension, so that is in
Then it would be.
Mr. McGee, you might want to just come up and clarify.
Anyone going to Renaissance Academy, the recommendation would have to be a suspension for over 10 days. So.
Okay, so those numbers would be in this chart then? Okay.
Yes.
And could we get some numbers basically similar to this chart based upon the referrals to Renaissance Academy? Have a similar chart over time?
Referrals specifically to Renaissance?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. The BASE program, where is that located now?
That's at Windsor Oaks Elementary School.
Okay, and how many students can it accommodate?
We are able to accommodate up to 8 at any given point in time, and and we assisted 22 this past school year.
Okay. So is it not necessarily at capacity then?
At this current, not at the beginning part of the year, no ma'am.
Okay.
But as we have seen from trend data, those referrals start to pick up, and we have been receiving some referrals over this past week.
Okay. And then one last question. I haven't seen anything in this presentation about parental involvement. How are parents and guardians being involved in the behavior modification process? Are parents being notified up front of referrals, of concerns, and if so, how are the parents being kind of held responsible and being a partner?
And then we can answer from both.
Yeah, so if you want to go first, and I'll go on the
From a
other
support
piece.
standpoint, Ms. Manning, whether it's the parent-teacher conference involvement, caregiver conference, any of the communications that are occurring about discipline infractions, that was more from the administrative side. However, when supports are put into place, as you heard, if we're involving the behavior intervention specialists, we have parental involvement. When there are conversations from a student response team, there's parental or caregiver involvement. And any ongoing support that's being provided, specifically from school psychologists, school social workers, school counselor, there's that ongoing dialogue of this is the progress I'm seeing, we need more information, or what information can you provide? And so any of the referral processes that you heard of in regards to our integrated systems of support, separate from SRT, but to include Section 504, as well as special education, all have that parental involvement piece of it. From a discipline standpoint,
From a discipline standpoint, they're involved pretty much from the beginning of it. If you look at our severe infractions, such as a fight, you're expecting the parent to come in and be part of that post-conference. I think one of the reasons why we've seen some decrease in suspension incidents, not necessarily the severity over the last couple of years, but decrease, is that recognition of what are the supports we're putting in place when students come back. And parents are hugely important in what that looks like and how we can help support the student return back and reintegrate into the classroom. A lot of that starts very early with the parent, teacher calling the parent very early and saying, these are behaviors I'm recognizing, I need your assistance here. And then when it elevates to the end where it's met to the school administrator, the expectations that they engage with the parent almost immediately around those pieces.
might add one more piece to that. From a mental health side, that is one of the new resources that was referenced in the presentation in regards to any student who has had to stay at a residential treatment facility or some type of facility. Upon their return, it's been part of our protocol, but to have a more specific plan in place, that document now exists for our schools. In addition to that document, which would of course include family involvement as well as any release of information that they can provide from that treatment facility, so that we have a more supportive plan in place. In addition to it, there is a student support document that is being worked on, or actually is ready, but will be implemented midpoint of this year, so that student strengths can be emphasized in that conversation with the student, and it's something that the student would keep with him, her, or themselves, so that they can think through those resources throughout the day, should they need assistance, and that's something that then is discussed with the family, so that we know what's being done at school versus what's being done at home.
Okay, so is there a requirement when there is a referral written on a student, is there a requirement to have affirmative contact with the parents?
There's an expectation that they are contacting the parents, yes.
Okay.
And
Who is?
the administrator.
Okay.
Teacher would be always the first line of defense who wrote the referral and said, this is the behavior I observed. Sometimes if it escalates into a more serious offense, typically the administrator might be the first contact. So a disruption in the classroom, kind of a garden variety disruption, we would expect the teacher to be the first point of contact. If it's something that a fight in the cafeteria, typically the administrator would be the first point.
So that's a requirement that the parent is contacted?
Yeah, we have an expectation that they are contacting the parent.
Okay.
Making every effort to do so. And you had posed the question about the Renaissance Academy, and I think one of the things we've done very well with that, and you saw Mr. Collier, one of our student support specialists, who we re-engage those students when they come back before the school year starts with their family to see how can we ensure we're not sending you back to Renaissance, and if you're not meeting with success, is that the area where you felt like you were? So as a former principal, it was always I wanted my parents to be a huge advocate for improving that behavior, and how can we partner in doing that, and I think that's pretty well felt out at all of our schools.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and if I could add in, as a former assistant principal and principal, the goal is to always have contact with the parent. But there were numerous times when I was an assistant principal where I was unable to get in touch with the parent during the school day, and it was a phone call actually the next day. So the intention is to always engage the parent because they can be that partner for you. However, sometimes you're unable to get in touch with that parent on that particular day, and you don't get in touch with them until the next day.
That's it for now, Mrs. Manning?
Yes.
Okay, Mrs. Melnick.
So we have a lot of supports in place. Glad to see it. And I hate to say it like this, but quite frankly, statistically speaking, 25% of our black male students can expect to be suspended this year. And so I hope that we're putting, huh? What did I say? Referred. I meant to say referred. They can expect to be, statistically speaking, expect to be referred this year. So I'm hoping that we're paying close attention to that particular statistic, and that we're finding a way to really address that, because it's not a new stat, honestly.
We look at all of those pieces as well. When you look at the rate of our referrals for our boys in elementary school, it kind of plays in those lines as well. So if you're an African American male with special education that's economically disadvantaged, your percentages go pretty much through. So how are we providing those supports to them?
Yeah.
So I think all of us are aware of the challenge and trying to, I know our elementary school principals have been so thankful for the buses that have come in and the supports they provide the teachers to help manage some of the behaviors.
And the onus is on the board as well to recognize that statistic and to talk about it.
So I'll go ahead with more an observation, and it was early on in the presentation, and it was like a flip of the data about the number of behavioral support specialists we have. I think it was you who mentioned, Dr. Janicki, that it started with three, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Three support specialists who had an average caseload of about 25 schools or more, and then it has become through the years flipped to 25 specialists down to 3 or 4 schools apiece. Am I right about that? Loosely speaking.
In the video. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Andrea Kearney, our lead behavior intervention specialist.
Because I just think that really struck me, and obviously this was implemented over the course of time. We didn't jump from 3 to 25 overnight, right? But I think it's important for the public to see, how far back do we go where we had 3, just to appreciate where we are now and where we were then.
Well, in line with that, if I may, this has been something that Virginia Beach City Public Schools has been reviewing for some time. I think as you saw from the beginning data, we're at 63,000 plus referrals, and we're down to the 26,000 that we are today. As you see the increase in the number of resources and supports that have been put in place, conversations that were occurring with Compass to 2015, conversations that occurred and continued with our Blue Ribbon panel, and things that we're still looking at today in terms of advocating for more. So even within the Blue Ribbon panel in 2018, we asked for an additional 9. We asked for additional school counselors, and we've asked for additional school psychologists and social workers and the like. And our trend data aligns with, or actually it's a negative inverse correlation, but as our supports have gone up, our discipline referrals have gone down. Ms. Melnick, to your point, I think everyone in this room understands, and you've seen that data, and being very honest and open as a person of color, yes, it is hurtful, and being able to see that, which is why it's so impacting, so important that we remain focused on that data.
Thank you.
And we have multiple things in place, including work this week with members of senior staff. We'll be spending time.
And the work is obvious, right? We can,
Correct. And I'm sharing that as a point of recognition, that over the years, we've seen it as an issue. We put resources in place, which is why it's so important to focus on relationships, which is where this begins, before we jump to discipline referrals. And at the same time, having the staff in place with that same understanding.
Thank you.
Yes.
We snagged Andrea from CSNAP.
Oh, and thank you for, I think it bears a reminder that about the counselors that were added. When we added a counselor to every high school, that was maybe, 5 years ago? Our traditional counselors, not the specialists, but because they play such a role too, and being the front line, kind of like the primary doctor, and who isn't the expert in all things, but is able to recognize when the intervention needs to be requested, right? Okay, Ms. Owens.
Yes.
Wait, let's go. You go ahead.
Okay.
We're on first
Oh,
round.
I didn't-
Okay,
I'm
Ms.
sorry.
It's okay, and I understand. I just like to make an observation, and again, thank you for this detailed report that you've given, and so much has been said that I wanted to say, so I don't have to go back through it, especially meals of color. But I'm interested in the slide 7 that you had, the number of referrals that you're showing in the chart there, and I'm observing throughout the years, and then when it gets down to a certain year, right, when I got on the board, it seemed to be coming down. I am concerned about all referrals. I see that, but it is so obvious that it's something different going on there that it brought in. So you mentioned a couple of things that we are doing, the Blue Ribbon panel, and we're having those conversations to make sure that you're paying attention to what's happening, and hopefully you are integrating those things that were in those past years that were not integrated there. I've lived in Virginia Beach all of my life, and I attended Virginia Beach Public Schools as well. And I remember the administrations that served. And I remember that we did not always have working administrators. So I'm saying in a nutshell, I can see that this is a working administration that's putting forth some effort, and you're listening. And I know progress takes a minute. I know this. But you're speaking it openly and you're speaking frankly. I just observed that chart. Then if you want to speak on it, Mr. Laney, any more further on that it just jumped out at me that it was high those certain years, but now it has trended down to low. So,
Well, I think you hit it the nail on the head. School looks a lot different than it did when we were in school, and even back to 2002, 2003, where it was very, the supports weren't there, and quite often the mindset was you get suspended, then you come back and you kind of, lack of a better way of saying it, you're kind of to your own accord to figure out what your issues are. And an example I'll give you, it's not necessarily the referral number, but it's how we handle tardies. I think the data was like 49% of suspensions in 2008-9 were for tardies. And it was like 2,000 kids were being suspended for tardies, where I think in 18-19 it was like 200. Doesn't mean they're not getting a form of punishment. We said let's move them into Wednesday detention. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to remove you from a day of classes for being 30 seconds late to class. Like we're sending a mixed message there how important it is to be in class on time, and we're going to remove you for a day from being there. So, and a lot of teachers have made that shift in mindset too. Like, what are we really want them in class and succeeding, because when they're not here, it exacerbates other components. So, what are the supports we can put in place? And I think that's the kind of what you're speaking to, the difference in administratively how we try to approach some of this.
and I am, because all of my children, nieces and nephews, went to Virginia Beach Public School. Totally different conversation that we're having now. And I just want to make the observation of where it was, where it is now, and who's in making a difference. Thank you.
Anybody else who hasn't spoken before we go back to Ms. Owens? Okay, Ms. Owens.
It's my last one, I think. In looking at the ratios of disparity charts, and it's helpful just to have it all kind of laid out. One of the things that seems consistent to me, but feel free to correct me if I am overgeneralizing, is that there is less disparity in each of the groups represented at the high school level across time, and there tends to be the most disparity at the elementary school level across all of those groups, kind of across time. And so I'm wondering if we have any thoughts on what we attribute that to, and if there's any kind of lessons that we can be gaining from whatever is helping to have slightly less disparity at the high school level to bring some more, bring that through to the middle or elementary school level.
I may have theories that I'm a little apprehensive to share what it may be.
Yeah.
But I think a common thing in the high school is this switching of teachers throughout the day, the common opportunity to be in a different environment consistently throughout the day. It's always the thing I respect elementary school teachers so much about, is they spend a full day with the same students every day and have to manage that behavior day to day to try to correct it. Or on the high school level, you get some breathing room to kind of recompose and say, how do I want to approach this? How can I engage the parent before the referral comes? That's my assumption, Ms. Owens, but I think that's one component. I think there's other research out there that could share some concerns around our young males in elementary schools and kind of how are their behaviors viewed by folks that don't always understand how a young male is going to interact going out to recess or something of that nature. That is an area where I think we need to take a hard look is some of those components.
Yeah. You said takeaways as well as, I'm going to start with takeaways. I think it speaks to the importance of early intervention. And as we have expanded our approaches and structures and resources to those pre-K, even as we get into primary, it speaks to that. And that's why when we talk about funding going to those programs, it's so important. And although we look at graduation and we look at on-time grad and all of those numbers, we can't lose sight of the fact that the early interventions are vital so that students make it to that end goal from a K-12 standpoint. Separate to that, I think the other piece that's important to mention is just brain science and development. And I think you heard Mr. Nichols in the video speak to those students who are so quick, your amygdala is flying, firing, you're going to respond. And sometimes those responses do not align with our student code of conduct. And there is, as you have all seen if you've ever spent time in elementary school, there's a level of understanding, right? So as we get to a 15-year-old who maybe over the course of 6, 7, 8 years of instruction has learned some self-regulations tools and skills and has built their capacity in a moment to recognize that I might need to walk away from this situation, that is extremely different than a 6-year-old who just started school, who is used to interacting with no sibling or only one sibling, and certain behaviors in the home work better. That's regardless of what you look like or regardless of any differences in background. So just wanted to share that some of what we're seeing is actually just normal for someone who is 6, 7, 8 years old. And that as we work to understand, and we continuously do, some of our data will change, and some of our practices will change accordingly.
And I think, just to follow that up, I think a key point is the change in how we view kids are supposed to be disciplined by elementary school teachers. And giving some grace to our elementary school teachers to help figure out how they can support the student. And they're under a lot of pressure on some of these areas of how do I take certain behaviors that we might have seen were, to Bobby's point, typical of a 7-year-old and saying, if I don't handle this a certain way, well, it appear as if I'm not creating a safe classroom environment. And we are hearing those challenges at times around, feeling like we've got to go to a higher level because parents or others want that done in that manner. And I think there is a component of that as well I think that's the importance of those supports where there's a collaborative group that can observe that behavior and help make a decision. I hope that makes sense. But I think there's some of that element that exists as well that we're working on with our leaders and our teachers.
It does, and I thank you guys for those responses. I have some theories myself, but they're just that, they're theories. I don't know if there's a way to bring some people together and talk about those theories or to collect them in a more data-driven, clean data method. When I think about the brain science, the amygdala, that certainly should result in lower, perhaps, referral rates, but the disparity being different at the high school level than the elementary school level seems like a different piece that doesn't kind of run the way I would expect it to. So if there are opportunities for us to kind of find some of those factors that are making high school teachers and staff able to manage whatever they're managing with less of a disparity, not just less of a frequency, then
And to that point, Ms. Owens, I'm certain that with Bobby's work with his team, they use the data often. Where are these incidents that kept occurring? What time are they occurring? Who's involved in those pieces? So many times we look at the discipline data, generally people think classroom. And so it's important why we are providing professional learning for our bus drivers, because we know a student that's engaged in some misbehavior there is going to translate in the hallway in the classroom. So that's the level of data that they drive into, is what are the kind of the, lack of a better term, triggers. And I know the team Bobby works with, they are very data driven and research based on how they're going to intervene.
Which is why we've expanded to the different professional learning for our school nurses, for cafeteria workers, and even custodians and security assistants.
So I thank you. As a parent of a 2016 Black male special education disadvantaged financial disadvantaged child, high school was a different ballgame, and I appreciate the movement that we're taking in that.
So I'll just reiterate that, or not reiterate, but remind everyone that this was an outgrowth of the summer retreat. So we appreciate, at the summer retreat, when staff survey was shared, there was a commitment expressed on the part of staff that you would come back to us in the fall with this workshop. And so here we are today, and I know with all this information to digest, I think it was a great questions, and I know you'll remain available for any of us for follow-ups, and this is ongoing. That's another takeaway from this, obviously, right? And always assessing and reassessing. And, anything you want to add, Dr. Spence?
No, I appreciate the questions and the conversation. Obviously, attending to student behavior and thinking about that is something that we spend a lot of time on, and I hope you got an understanding of that this evening and the work that's gone into providing supports for students and making sure that we are attending to that. And I appreciate those of you who have surfaced that there are ongoing disparities both in referral rates and suspension rates. One of the things we didn't mention, so two things I'll just tie into that. There is a conversation tonight about our equity plan. I think our equity plan acknowledges some of this as well and allows us to take a look at what are the key strategies that ought to be in place to begin to address some of those disparities in our data, not just in discipline, but in other places, which is the kind of why behind an equity plan. The other thing that I would mention is I think one of the big shifts that we're attending to and we're thinking about, and that I think has been made, over time, is a shift from deficit to strengths-based thinking. And I think that's a behavioral science shift, right? So when you approach behavior as a deficit model, it's, what did the kid do wrong? And what are we going to do about that? And it's really kind of centered on punishment. And when you shift to a strengths-based model, it's what's going on in this child's life, what are the strengths that can help that child overcome what's going on in their life that may be driving some of these behaviors, or what's going on in the classroom that may be driving some of these behaviors. And then how do we put the appropriate level of support in place to leverage their strengths to help them come through that? And I think that's a shift over time, and I think for a lot of people that's a mindset shift, and it's just something we have to keep working at, and that's where the professional learning comes in. That's why you hear us talk all the time about the importance of relationships and the need to continue to work on how we establish relationships in our classrooms, and you hear teachers, really great teachers, talk about how it can be challenging. Even in places where we think they're great places, and in our schools, we'd love to think that all the kids behave perfectly all day long and don't come to our schools with significant trauma or any kind of adverse experiences, but we know that that's simply not the case. And unfortunately, the data actually tells us that in every classroom in Virginia Beach, we have children who have experienced significant trauma and who have experienced adverse experiences. And because of that, all of our team has to be adept at dealing with that kind of strengths-based model mindset as we think about how we support kids. And so that's a really heavy lift because it's also not part of our culture. And I'll just say, when I say our culture, I mean public education writ large, because the culture of public education had been for so long, let's sort and select, let's go from a deficit model. And, that's been shifting only really in the last couple of decades. And so it's they say big ships turn slow, and not that that's okay, because when you're the parent of a child who's struggling, you don't want to hear big ships turn slow. You want to know what we're going to do for your child today. And so that's why we're engaging in these conversations. So I guess that I did want to add that.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. So this workshop is adjourned, and we'll be convening in chambers at 6 o'clock for our formal meeting.
Let's just do close. best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered.
Okay, second, Mrs. Manning. All in favor, show raised hand, please.
We have 8 ayes, the motion passed.
All right.
Should we pass
So,
this back
no,
to
the
you?
first, we have to vote now.
Oh, we're voting now or later?
Yes,
Yeah.
no, okay.
Okay, so I move that the school board adopt the job description for the school board attorney, and in addition, the changes to the audit department as follows. 1, revise the internal auditor job description and place it on grade 28. Revise the salary range for this position to start at $125,000. Change the Office of Internal Audit's Office Associate position to an Executive Office Associate on grade 13, and change the job description for Executive Office Associate to add reporting to a chief, school board attorney, or school board auditor. Move the other internal auditor positions to U20. Change the Office of Internal Audit summer intern hourly rate to $20 per hour. Ms. Woodson's pay for serving as the acting internal auditor began on August 1st and will continue beyond the 31st deadline until a new auditor is hired. And change the name from the Office of Internal Audit to the Department of Internal Audit to the Department of Internal Audit.
Okay, a second.
Second.
Mrs. Felton. Okay, all in favor, show a raised hand, please.
We have 8 ayes, the motion did pass.
Thank you all.
Also, are you
And-
collecting these?
Yes.
Tammy's, thanks.
And,
Do you want these back?
Do we need a vote on
Yeah.
that?
You did.
We did.
No, on this.
We did.
You voted on both. Yeah, yeah.
It was the first statement I made.
Okay,
It was brief.
so workshop is now officially concluded and reconvene in 6 o'clock, formal meeting.
I have that.
Yes,